We're back. We've got a new part kit, the DNA 75. This is the latest as of this video from Evolve Vapor. And it's not as powerful as the 200, obviously, because it only goes to 75. So there's that. This part kit is pretty much cribbed the same thing from the DNA 200, but one exception. We're not running a LiPo on this one. That's the board and the screen. I'll pull that out in a minute. Throw in a little brand advertising there. So what do we got? Here's the big difference. It's a single 18650 sled, which is kind of cool. This whole board runs off one 18650. I will also have this in dual 18650, so you get better battery life, and I'm also pondering a single 26650, so that should be possible. Otherwise, pretty much all the same parts from the DNA 200. We got 3 brass standoffs to mount the board to the box. It's going to come standard with a 1590G, which will be a little bit smaller for most people. Be kind of nice. So 3 brass standoffs, 3 metal machine screws for the front face. Let me pick them all off the magnets here. Jeez. 3 stainless steel machine screws to mount the board to the brass standoffs. 4 magnets and 4 grub screws so you can get the magnetic lid going on it. It's going to come standard with these 3 shelf pins, and I'm going to end up swapping these out, I think, for this build. But you can check out the other videos, see how I ground those down and get them measured and fit them in the box and everything. And a Fat Daddy Vapes V4 low profile stainless steel 510 connector, and the acrylic screen protector that kind of acts as the window. So that is the basis of the kit. There will also be wire in it. This is my first build, so I'm going to figure out how much wire to put in it. But the wire will come with it. And that's it. So for this one, I think I'm going to swap out a few of these parts just to make it look a little cooler. Instead of the nickel magnets, I'm going to go with some black ones. So 4 black magnets there. That's an extra option. I'm also going to go with the black 510 connector instead of stainless steel. And for the box, since I have these new and everything, I'm going to do this red on white splatter, which I think will look pretty cool. For the buttons, I'm going to do... What am I going to do? I'm going to go with a chrome button, and for the up-down, I think I'm going to use these tack switches, and that will about cover it, I believe. So I'm going to try to rush through this one. I'm going to see if I can get this done in under an hour. If I can, I'll be pretty impressed with myself. But if I can't, you know, hopefully it's a nice quick video anyway. Alright, tools. For working the metal on the box, we're going to need at least a hand drill. If you have a drill press, that helps a lot with the magnet hole buttons. And past that, we're going to use a Dremel to cut out the screen hole, as it were. And to finish off that hole, I'm going to use some of these cheap files I have. Find these in the bargain bin. Don't pay the big money for like individual files. Go to the bargain bin. Drill bits, 1/4" bit for the magnet holes in the lid. 13/64 as per the drilling diagram for the tack buttons and shelf pins, actually. And a 5/64 for the mounting screws for the board. Much past that, a bench vise is very handy. I've modified this one where I added on these what are these, HDPE to the vise heads to make it a little bit nicer on the powder coating. Past that, what else do we need? Step drill bit, very helpful for doing the buttonholes and the 510 connector hole. Again, pretty cheap at Harbor Freight or wherever you want to go. And with the Dremel, I'm just using this cutting disc here. So that is about it. One thing to note about the drilling diagram, and I get a couple emails about this, I'd say, I don't know, once a month, where somebody prints this out and the scale does not match. And they mess up their box, and I feel bad for them, but I put warnings in all the videos. I put warnings on the webpage where you download the drilling diagram. Do not print this out from your browser. So let me repeat that. Don't print this out from your browser. Your browser likes to add margins and it screws up the scale. When you do print it out, take a ruler and check this scale up here at the top. That should be 1 inch by 1 inch. That will make sure it's dead on for the boxes and everything else. If you're on Windows, download the PDF and open it up in like Adobe Acrobat. Make sure the scaling's set to 100% and print it out that way. If you're on Mac, you can just use Preview and print it out from there and it'll work fine. So do not print this out from your browser. Okay. Okay. What should we do here? We need to cut this out. Again, like the directions indicate, you want to cut outside the black line. Just the way my program works, the black lines are included in the dimensions. It's not entirely critical, but just keep that in mind. For this one, I think I'm going to use this centered 510 connector. Got plenty of room in the box and shouldn't need to worry about the battery getting in the way at all. So that is cool. Get that all cut out. And for this one, I'm going to try to do something a little bit different. I'm going to mount the screen on the front of it here. I think there's room. So I'm going to check that after I get the box all opened up and everything. But so I'm going to use one of these templates for basically the screen holes and the drilling holes and the USB. And then I'm going to use the other one to position the buttons, which I think makes sense. Sort of. I don't know. I planned all of this in about 10 minutes. I literally just got these boards today. So I want to get this recorded and posted ASAP. Alright, so there are our 3 templates. The handiest thing for using these is a glue stick, actually. It's washable, so we're not harming the paint or anything. And I'm just going to open this up here. First decision is what's going to be the bottom and what's going to be the top. Go make that the top. For that, I like to just take a hammer and a punch, and I'll show you how to line these up here. Alright, so each of these diagrams has these vertical lines on the sides, and those are intended to line up with the screw posts on the inside, because it's kind of hard to line them up with a rounded corner. So that's how that works. And then they are offset to account for the thickness of the lid. So just keep that in mind. So I just kind of hold that in place. take the punch, line it up, give it a whack, and that is our 510 hole. On the side here, I don't know, I guess the first thing I should check is if this actually fits. So here is our battery sled. That'll fit roughly like that. And here is the board. It's upside down and inverted, but I think that will work. Maybe dead center wasn't such a great idea, but I think it'll fit. So that's going to end up getting flipped around like that. And I'm going to keep that sort of out of the way of the button that's going to poke through. The screen's still in there. So, yeah, that should work. And if it doesn't, I guess I'll record another video. Alrighty. Next up, where'd that go? So, I don't know if it makes much sense to have the adjustment buttons on the side. The only thing I really want to avoid is having to put the adjustment buttons in someplace different. Again, I could probably get that all the way over there. I'll put them on the side. It won't look that bad. But maybe I'll turn their orientation. Alright, so again, since this isn't the screen, I'm not going to use the glue stick. And just like that. And then, I don't know, I'm just kind of eyeballing this. It looks pretty straight, right? Yeah, that's not straight. Fortunately, I have this handy little thing here. Close enough. Alright, so that's our buttonholes. Let's do the front now. Now maybe I'll make a special pattern for this later if I feel like spending the time on it. So it lines up correctly on the front face. But basically all we have to do is avoid the button and the screw post there. That looks to be about right. So I'll slap some glue on that. Get it mostly lined up, and I guess I can use this. Make sure it's flush or perpendicular. Yeah, it's pretty good for eyeing it. Oops. Alright, I'm going to put too much glue on there, but that's okay. Let that sit for a second. What I'm going to do is grab some clear tape and place over that. I'll give the paper a little bit more strength while we're drilling on it. So there's that. Okay, drilling. Let's get started. I'll do the 510 connector first. And safety glasses, of course. Alright, so that was the 7/16 hole, and that is on the drilling diagram. Just like to brush all this off, make sure I don't wedge any aluminum chips into the case and the powder coat. The buttonhole is going to be a 1/2 inch. Overrun on those two doesn't matter terribly much because the button and the 510 connector both have a flange on them. Next up, we got our, what is this? That's the 1/4 inch. The 13/64. And that's going to be the perfect size to fit the tactile buttons. I think this is kind of like a specialty size. So it's not going to come in a standard drill bit kit. I know I had to buy it separately. And I'm just going to put those right like that. Try to be a little bit more careful. And those almost look like they're aligned. Yeah, like I said, I'm rushing this one. Let's see here. Alright, so now for the weirdness. And I'm going to take the lid off and get rid of all that crap in there. And tighten that down. Grab my electric drill, and I got an 1/8 inch bit in there right now. For this, it just needs to be a small bit. Doesn't particularly matter what size it is, because we're just going to start the holes for the screen, and I like to mark those. So just kind of gauge inside the box there. Now the screen is the solid black line on here, the visible portion of the screen anyway. And the dotted line is just the actual physical part of the screen. Alright, so I'm making these so I can connect the screen with a cutout wheel. I really shouldn't talk while I'm drilling. So you probably can't hear me. Alright, so there's that. We're not going to drill the buttonholes. I should have crossed those off, but that's okay. So let's mark these other ones real quick. These screw holes, if you get the scale right and you heeded my advice in the previous section, will line up perfectly with the board. And it's not a bad idea to compare the printout to the actual board before you start either. And the USB, I'm just going to drill 2 more small 1/8 inch holes. Actually, I took that out. And that will just be so I can get the file in there. Alright, so there's those. And now we need the 5/64, which was the really small one, or a 2mm if you happen to have metric drill bits. The screws are actually 2mm. Line that up. Didn't want to do that. There we go. Okay, so now we gotta cut out the screen, which is kind of a fun part. Let's see here. For this, I think I'm going to need to raise this up quite a bit, actually. And to do that, I'm going to grab some scrap wood. Alright, that worked. So we're just going to use one of these plain old cutting wheels for the Dremel. I used to use this metal burr, and I found after it got like barely dull, it was really hard to control. So I stopped using it. These cutoff wheels just seem to be faster. I found I was going through the burrs way too quickly. Alright, so basically what we're trying to do is just cut 2 lines right inside that box, not outside. The fit doesn't particularly matter, but I want to keep it clean, so. Alright, just that easy, sort of. And then I use the punch here and just knock that out. So I'm going to take this wood out, just so it's a little bit easier to work the files with. And that's what it looks like from the back. Get that centered up there. And then all we really got to do is just kind of clean this up. Now if you want to, you can round the corners and make this any sort of cutout that you want. Just keep in mind, there's that. The plastic for it only goes that big, the acrylic rather. So you should probably try to keep it within that range. But this is mostly just decorative. Alright. And the only thing I'm trying to do is make sure I get rid of that drill mark in the corner. And just get this all cleaned up so it looks nice. And I'm just going to hit the corners one more time. Make sure they're nice and square. Alright, then the last thing is this USB port, which is always a little tricky to get the sizing right on. For that, use a round file, and I'm just going to let the file eat out the metal between the two drill holes. You could always try to like Dremel this out, I suppose, but personally I don't trust myself with the Dremel to do anything more than roughen stuff out. I really like to finish it with the files. I just don't feel like I have like that great a control over Dremel. Now, I know I never really file these out wide enough the first time. So, let's take that a little bit further. And then what you can do is you can just test fit it from the outside. And the USB port fits in fine. And it looks like those line up well enough. So now we can peel that off. And I'm just going to go wash this crap off in the sink. I'll be right back. Alright, looking at it, I got a little off kilter there. Probably mostly due to it's the first time I've done it this way. So we'll fix that real quick and even it up. Let's get this centered over the hole in the vise. See what that's looking like with the square. And I could go a little bit further on the end there. How's this side? It's kind of bowed out in the middle. And check that again. Good enough. I'm just going to clean up the corners. One thing to be careful with is using these square files in the corner. These take off metal really quickly, so just kind of be aware of that. One thing I like to do is use this countersinking bit and just give these a few turns. You could probably use a slightly larger drill bit to do this. Not a huge difference, but this will just help sink those screws in a little bit. And that should be about perfect. Alright, so the only thing left is to do the magnet holes. And I'll rotate the camera here in a moment. So we got our 1/4 inch bit. Again, the drill press is definitely helpful in this regard. I could remember how to use it. I think this is actually all I use this drill press for. The only reason the bit was out of it just now was to show it on the video over there. So I don't go all the way through on the lid. I like to leave a little lip, and I feel like that helps retain the magnets. We'll get to that. And you might wonder how I know how deep to go. I don't, at least consciously. So that fits in there perfectly flush now, and I'll do that to the other 3 holes. Alright. I always test fit these to make sure they all fit. And they look like they're good. Perfect. And that is the drilling. That's our box. Next I'll probably clean that up a little. It's not that pretty. Next we'll get to the wiring, which is not going to be complex, fortunately, and get it all put together. Alright, let's talk tools of the trade real quick for the second half. You're obviously going to need a soldering iron. This is a piece of crap. Wow, that looks like it's corroded or something. I haven't used this in forever. This is a cheap Radio Shack soldering iron. That actually doesn't surprise me. I don't know, what is this, like a 15 watt or something? Yeah, this is a this is a piece of crap. But you can spend as much or as little as you want on a soldering iron, but you're gonna get what you pay for, I think. I use a Hakko FX 888D. This is a great soldering iron. I use it practically every day. It is about 90 bucks on Amazon. Occasionally, if you have a Fry's electronics store in your town, they have them on sale for like 60, which is a great deal if you can get it. But other than that, I would say if you spend 30 bucks on a soldering iron, you're probably going to get a pretty decent one. So, you know, caveat emptor, all that other crap. You're going to need solder, preferably a flux core solder. Just helps a lot. Flux itself also is helpful, but this stuff is kind of expensive for a tube of it. I think it's like 12 bucks for a tube. I've gone through, and I do this a lot, I want to say 4 tubes in a little over a year. So keep that in mind. Wire strippers, definitely going to need those. I also like to have these separate angle cutters for getting into tight places to snip wires. A third hand tool, or in my case, a 6-arm El Squido. And yes, I know squids have 8 arms, I think, but whatever. This is, and people always ask, this is hydraulic tubing for water coolant and stuff. Ordered these from China. They're like $6 for 6 of them or something like that. And then you just take these alligator clips and jam them in the ends. And I threw some heat shrink tubing on the teeth here to kind of dumb them down a little, because otherwise they're a little harsh on circuit boards. But other than that, it works great. So that's the tools. There will be wire included in the kit, along with any heat shrink tubing that I feel is necessary. So let's get going. I feel like I always miss these obvious tools, but a small screwdriver, and we're going to use that to put these machine screws into the board. And I do occasionally get emails from people who don't watch the whole video, and I understand. Personally, I don't think I could ever watch a whole one of my videos. It's about like watching paint dry to me, but you know, there are people who like them. So here's the deal. These don't fit perfectly in these holes, and that is because they are tinned with solder, and they're just slightly smaller. Just, you know, slowly work it in. It will thread, and just try to keep it as perpendicular to the board as you can, because that will affect the alignment of the brass standoffs when you try to mount it to the box. So just thread those in. You're not going to break the board. You don't need to drill them out or anything like that. They do fit. And the reason I didn't go with a smaller screw is, like, the next smallest screw is really tiny, at least that you can normally buy. So it's kind of a trade-off, but these work perfectly fine. So just get them in there. There we go. And the reason I'm attaching these now is to give my 6-arm tool here something to grab onto while we're working on it. There we go. And then I just like to grab the brass standoffs here and thread those on. I don't think I quite got that one straight, but we'll make it work. And like I said, this will just give the 6-arm tool something to grab onto instead of the circuit board. So there's that. Next up, what do we want to do first? I actually don't want to do anything with this board first. One thing I did want to double check was the alignment. And I'll drop that in there. And pretty dead on. I think I'm gonna have to wrangle that bottom one I kind of put in sideways, but other than that, I think it'll be good. And the USB connector fits. So there's that. Come back to the screen. First off, let's do the 510 connector, and you're going to want to disassemble this. So that's the positive pin with the spring loaded. And I'm going to pull the negative ring off of here. Throw the rest of those parts back in. Zoom in a little bit here. Service announcement. If you are not careful when you're soldering this, you will solder the spring-loaded portion to the nut portion. And I will show you how to avoid doing that. First thing we want is to get a little bit of flux, and this is where this stuff really helps. Just a little bit, and we're going to smear it around inside the pin. Now we want to keep it inside the pin. Try not to get it on the outside, because that will draw flux and solder it like I just said you shouldn't. Now let's grab some wire. And I'm just going to cut off a large chunk just so I know I have enough. And I'm going to intentionally strip a little extra here. And I know that's way too big, but that will actually help when we're trying to solder this. So, yeah, about like that's fine. Twist that back up, dip it in flux, and then I'm going to tin up this wire. And that will help in the soldering. Get a little bit more on there. Alright, so here's the deal. I'm going to put this in here like this, and I'll try to grab it so it stays in place. And we're going to solder this on here. Try to keep that in the center of the frame. And basically what we're going to do is let the flux that's already inside the pin draw the solder in. And it will bubble out. And you'll hear it. Alright, so that looks good. Just going to take that off there so it doesn't melt. That's the positive pin. Real easy to do. The negative pin, also real easy. Or negative ring, rather. Again, using a little bit of flux. I'm going to smear some and try to get it on that hole. It's really helpful for retaining the wire on it. And let's grab some black wire. I think this is negative ground. Again, way more than we need. And the trick here is you don't want to solder on a piece of wire that overlaps that inner ring, because that is where the nut locks down onto the 510 connector. And I'm going to tin this up again, just to make sure it sticks. Get some flux all over it. Lay that on there and tack it down real good. And that is our negative ring. Alright, next up let's prep these tactile buttons. Looking for my pliers. So here's what I like to do with these tack buttons. Where the pins are on the same side is what connects the switch. So when the button's pressed, it connects these two pins. And the ones opposite of each other are the same pin. So we just need two on the same side. And what I like to do is just first flatten these out with a pair of pliers. And then ever so gently bend them out flat. Just so they're like that. And now you notice I didn't clip the other two off yet. So you want to bend these out and get them into position and everything before you clip off the other two. Because if you break them, you're going to be very unhappy with yourself and you're not going to have any pins left. And I will note that ordering more of these buttons, the shipping costs more than the button does. So just err on the cautious side and bend them before you clip off the excess. And there we go. So this time I'm not going to make the mistakes I made in one of the other videos. Going to get these soldered up nice and cleanly. For this, I think I'm going to use red for one button and black for the other. So clip off some wire here. And since this isn't a very big box, we don't need too much. One of the other reasons I like these hands is it gives me something to steady my hands on. So I'm going to trim those down just a little bit. Go. Get that. There we go. And throw a little bit of heat shrink on there, which will be included if you buy the tack buttons. Otherwise, I don't think you're going to need them. So just clip off a few little pieces here and thread those on. Another optional tool, I guess, although I highly suggest it, is having a heat gun. I really don't like the idea of using a lighter to shrink these down, but you can. Nobody's going to call the police. So that's one, and now let's do the other one. Get these stripped. And trim off just a little bit of these. They don't need to stick out quite so far. There we go. A little more heat shrink tubing. Get that on there. There we go. Alright, that is our tack buttons. Since I don't want to deal with measuring it the other way, so here's how we're going to attach them to the board. Evolve has helpfully provided outs, pin outs, or whatever you want to call them, for the buttons. And on the nearest to the fire button here, we have fire, and then there is, yeah, I can't even read that. What is that? So that looks like a D and that looks like a U. So down, up. I really hope that's right. I guess you can look on the data sheet if you got any questions. So I'm actually gonna put the fire button wires on here now. Just for simplicity of assembly, which will probably make a little bit more sense later. What I'm going to end up doing is feeding these wires out the buttonhole and then screwing them down on the button or soldering them if you choose one of the other options, and be able to trim them at that point. So let's get this and that. So these are real easy to solder. These holes look small, but it's not too tricky. I'm going to solder the far one first, and all it really takes is a touch of solder. And it's good and stuck. I am dipping these in flux off camera, just for the record. Which is part of the reason I think people give me a lot of crap about my soldering style. really, as long as it's fluxed and you have the wire properly heated, the contact heated, there's not really any issue. So those are going to come out the side there, and I'm just going to use my little angle nippers here to trim off those wires. There we go. Alright, so next up, let's take a moment to sort of test fit these. I think we're going to have to clean that up a little. I think the drill bit left just like a little bit of a ridge. So I'm just running the file through here. Trying not to get it all over the electronics. And I want to keep these holes kind of tight, just so they grip the buttons better, which I went a little too far with, I guess. So just getting these in here. Don't look too bad. Really what I'm trying to do here is get an idea of where they're going to end up in relation to how long they are. And this is just one of those things where doing it right really provides for a clean look. Like I said, those are going to go out there. So let's say the black one is the down button. Just going to very slightly bend these. There, I got an idea. We will take a marker and put a little mark on the inside of the case here. Give us an idea how far the wires have to go. That will make everything easier. There will be no crying. I'm going to stick these down later with some epoxy, but I can see I'm just going to go a little bit past that and reach in there, trim that. Now last time I used these tack switches, there's like this whole mess of like jumpering the wires, and man, it was bad. I swear it made the whole thing last like 30 minutes longer than it should have. There we go. Alright, so we got those prepped. Not going to put them on yet. Next, what we want to do is figure out where the 510 leads are going to come to. And remember, we intentionally made these like gigantic. I'm going to get this bent in here and just kind of straighten it out a little. So looking at this, this does not need to be that long at all. And there is unfortunately flux all over that thing. One thing I want to keep in mind here is keeping this out of the way of the button. So I'm going to make it just slightly longer than it needs to be to reach straight. So we'll call it right there. So that's the negative. And then the ground, I think we'll be able to come practically straight out of the back there. So I'll just make it about that one. Now it looks super short, and it kind of is, but I think this is going to work. Get these stripped down. And I'm going to flux and tin these. There we go. And there we go. Now we can attach these to the board. Again, we'll just grab it here. I do want to kind of pay attention to how this is going to get oriented. It's going to be about like that when it's in the box. So again, a little bit of flux, and we'll tack this down. Having a hard time seeing this actually. Alright, and this one, it's really short, so it's going to get hot quick, and I don't really want to burn myself. There we go. I have to say that ground is just really close to that fuse there. I don't like that. That's still really close. So I'm going to trim that down just a little bit. It's incredibly hot right now. One thing, I've had people send me pictures of like when their board's having problems and stuff, and with something like this, you really don't want a lot of excess insulated wire hanging off the edges anywhere. Whenever you solder something like this, because they can get like pushed together and short and just stuff like that. So you want to have it nice and neat. You don't want to have it trimmed like all the way back here to here and there's like bare copper just like flopping around and stuff. That's bad. So just keep that in mind when you're, you know, trimming out the wire and stripping it off and everything. Let's see if I can get this thing to cooperate. There, that is something I can live with. Alright, so we got to connect the tack switches and get the battery sled going. This part, there's one quick modification we need to make to the battery sled, and it's because these tabs, they hang off. This is meant to get soldered onto a circuit board. So we got to pull these off and basically trim them down just a little bit. First, I like to break these tabs off. And then what you need to do is grind down these tabs so they don't reach the bottom of the sled and therefore the bottom of the box, because that would short everything up and you don't want that. So what I'm going to do here is grab my mini bench grinder. And what we'll do is very quickly grind these down. So just hold them in a pair of pliers. Alright, so what I did there, I just ground off maybe like a millimeter or two, just enough to make sure they don't short out on the bottom of the box. And the other thing I like to do, I like to bend these tabs in just a little bit, and I just do that by grabbing them with some pliers and just bend them on the bench like that. And that gives us a nice solid base for the battery to contact, while also making sure it won't rip up our battery wraps, which is kind of annoying. For the sled, also as a part of it getting soldered onto a circuit board, it has these little knobs, or whatever you want to call them. I just like to trim those off. And that little one there. And you can further trim it down with a knife of some sort. Just make sure it's flush. Do. There we go. You can also trim off these tabs if you don't want the battery retention. For this one, I think I'm just going to leave them on. So there's that. Get the board out of the way here. And push these tabs back in. Just like that. So you can see that gap at the bottom now. Alright, so for these sleds, what are we going to have to do here? We're going to have to run one positive wire from this end all the way back down to the bottom, and then we're going to have to run the negative to the bottom there as well. So I'm going to do it positive up. And I bet I still got plenty of wire here. Is this going to be enough? That'll really be pushing the limit on that, but the black piece will be plenty long. So I'll grab a little bit longer piece. Keep this in mind when I'm making the kit. Alright, so there's some tricks to soldering onto these sleds. First thing I like to do is put some flux on the tab, and it's just smearing it on like that. And then I like to put a bead of solder on the tab. And these gold ones, they work a little bit better, I have to admit. Then we'll take the wire to be soldered and tin that up as well. There we go. So it's going to be going out that side. Whew, that's a little toasty. So I'm just going to put a bend in that, and I'm going to turn this around. So then more flux, and we can just tack this down. You don't need to worry about these battery sleds melting. They're glass reinforced nylon. Honestly, I don't even think my soldering iron can go hot enough to really do any damage to these things. There we go. Let that cool down. Don't touch the battery contact because it is also very hot. I've done that before. It hurts. Same process for the bottom here. Just kind of doing it a little bit in reverse. There we go. My little plate with flux on it. Keep some of that on there. Put a little tack down. And glob some more flux on, because flux makes everything better. There we go. Nice good solid solder. Alright, so that is cooling still. And I'm going to route that wire down around there. And I'm really hoping that will fit under the board. And that one will go that way. So what we got here? Temporarily, I'm going to attach the board to the blocks. Now, you do want to be careful cranking on these wires too much. It is possible to rip the pads off the board, and you really don't want to do that. I don't believe it's covered under warranty, so don't do that. It's bad. Very bad. You go pull one of my travel part kit, screwdriver tool kits or whatever. So I don't know where the thing I normally use went. So that's okay. Let's get this finished. So this is mostly just an effort be able to adequately measure where the battery sled wires are going to go. Cooperate. There. There's one. And I'm just going to put this bottom one in. Remember I said this was the one that was going to be trouble. Not too bad. And the screws do look pretty nice on there. Just kind of massage that into place. Alright, so here is our battery sled with the nice long wires on it. And B has to go right here closest, which is actually kind of unfortunate because that bend radius is going to get in the way. So that's going to be torquing on that a little bit. We got to be careful. And negative is going to go all the way over there. So, oh, ouch. Try to get the negative trimmed down first. There we go. And that, I think it's going to be better all around if I don't rip the insulation off. If I just tack it on like that. And that will just kind of overlap the board and get soldered down like that. And then we're not cranking on the wire or anything. So take that back off, get that out of there, unscrew the board, dang, and ding, there we go. So let's get this finished up. Gonna tack on the tack switches now. Solder on the tack switches. So get this clean. We just need to strip off a little bit of wire. Ding. Ding. There we go. So red is going to be up, which is going to be the nearest one. And let's see here. Feed these in from the bottom. There. Now let's go from the top. So it's going to be oriented like that. Go. And I'll do the same for the down button. just get in here with the nippers. Clean those all up. And the last thing we have to do is put the battery leads on. Again, we're going to try to keep what we strip off pretty short because these pads aren't that big. And I'm going to do the negative first. Come in from this side. I'm going to wipe a little bit of flux on the positive wire here. And bring that around the side. Now that I notice I have that pretty much out of the camera view. Somebody previously suggested I get a monitor for the camera here, and I discovered that I bought such a cheap camera. Although it is HD 720, it can't actually output what it's recording and record at the same time. So, yeah. Alright, final assembly here. This is where it gets tricky. My wire cutters. Trim these off about there. Let's see here. There we go. Just loosen these screws a little bit. Go. Take these. Okay. Throw it in there. Tighten that back down. I gotta admit, this is not the best way to do it, but it works. Alright, that should technically be a working mod at this point. Do want to... I think I'm going to cheat and use super glue this time. I'm kind of sick of the epoxy. It takes forever to dry. So I'll tuck that down in there. And hope to God this fits without having to take the board out. Sweet. Let's see here. There we go. Kind of tuck that down. Alright, except for the magnets in the lid, this should work. And we're going to buzz that down a little bit. Use a coin to tighten the 510 connector. That nice and tight. I'm just gonna have to buzz that a little bit with a file or whatever because it's hitting the 510 connector there. But much past that, probably have to do a little bit there too. Let's throw a battery in this. Okay, grab some batteries. Here we go. Negative, positive, all sitting in there. Alright, now here's the moment of truth. Hey, that is actually pretty well lined up. I'm amazed because I barely ever get it on the first try. Atomizer. My current favorite dripper, Sapor. 55 watts. Works pretty good. 0.36 ohm. Let's crank that all the way up to the max 75. There we go. Wow, that is a nice little vape. Weak battery, my ass. It's a fully charged battery. I think I need to reprogram this with eScribe. I'll double check that in a little bit. So what do we have left to do? We have to put the grub screws in, which isn't hard. I have to put the grub screws in, and I gotta buzz down the lid so it fits these. I think that was just mostly a drilling error. Probably want to epoxy down the battery sled just to make this a little bit easier to get in and out. Maybe break off like 2 of those tabs, maybe, because that was kind of a pain to get out there. Got to glue in the tack switches. These are pretty easy to glue in because they're shielded pretty much all the way up to the top of the button. So I'll probably just slap some epoxy on there, I think, for that. And then we got to glue in the magnets for the lid. I've covered that in like 100 other videos, so I think I'm going to stop recording, finish it up, and kind of come back with a finished product kind of thing. Alright, so there it is. I'm still complaining about a weak battery, but that's probably because that battery's like 2 years old at this point. The epoxy isn't quite dry on the magnets yet, but I don't really care. For the tack switches, I just super glued them in. Cheated with the battery sled and just used some sticky tape. So I put the grub screws in, epoxied the magnets, and I buzzed out this area on the sled so the button and the 510 could fit. And that is about it. I'd say it turned out pretty good. I wish Evolve would just put a 4th screw on there. That just looks weird to me. I know these are supposed to be like mounted inside of a box with no external screws or anything, but still, you know, I kind of wish they did. But hey, it works. So if you are interested in building one of these, you can visit nonameboxmods.com, and I will have a kit for this. I also plan on doing one for a dual 18650, and I'll see what box I can fit that in. Maybe I'll do a build video on that. And I'm also planning a Squonk DNA 75, so we'll be able to fit all of that for sure in a B box. I don't think it's going to fit in a G, unfortunately. So that's what it is. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more fun videos.